Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar tonight, Downsizing and Gifting, What Every Family Needs to Know. My name is Jacqui Brauman. If you haven't met me before, I am the Wills and Estate Specialist at SPG Lawyers. Uh, Tonight we have a special guest. We have Henry with us as well. Now, Henry Wong is going to share with us when and why selling the family home can be the smartest choice, plus how to navigate the process quickly and with minimal stress. Whether you're actively looking to downsize yourself or whether you're helping a loved one through, this is going to be packed with real world experience. Henry's model is really interesting. Um, he's a real estate agent that primarily has a lot of cash and unconditional contracts. So he's got an extensive network of local, interstate, and overseas buyers who are really willing to pay premium to find the right home. And so this will give you a different taste or a different idea of how this can be done. After Henry has presented, I will present as well a bit about the gifting rules. So once someone has downsized, what then do you do with that extra cash? If you buy something cheaper, of course, smaller, and you've got extra left over, what can happen with that? And we are running this as a webinar format, so there's no access to the chat feature. If you want to ask a question, the Q&A feature is there, so you can pop a question in. I am recording this, as I said, so those watching the replay don't have access to the Q&A feature, of course, so you're going to have to email us if you have a question. We will have Q&A at the end, at which time I'm going to stop the recording. So if you do have more personal questions, they won't be in the recording. And at that point, I can actually allow you to talk and you can raise your hand and ask the question if you don't want to type it. So we will come to that at the end. Otherwise, if you have questions as you go, type them into the Q&A function and yeah, we'll have a look at those as we go. Otherwise, I'm now handing over to Henry. Henry, take it away and tell us all about downsizing.
Hi, everyone. So why downsizing makes sense. So I'm a real estate agent with Remax Revolution, and the majority of my clients are actually seniors who are actually looking to downsize. In fact, over 80% of my clients are seniors. Now, just to move this slide. Okay, Jacqui, oh, here we go. So as Jacqui has mentioned, the majority of the sales that I do are cash unconditional sales. I do a lot with buyers from interstate and overseas that I introduce to sellers locally. I'm also Facebook's most connected agent in Southeast Queensland with over 11,000 followers, and also one of Google's highest rated agents with 171 reviews at 4.9 stars. Now, with regards to downsizing, let me move this. Okay. So I'm just trying to work these controls. Okay. There are primarily three reasons why people look to downsize. And what I've found over the last 5 years is the main reason people are looking to downsize is actually due to health. And I generally usually get reasons such as, look, Henry, I've just had a knee replacement, or I've had a hip replacement. Look, I can see in the next 5 to 10 years, the stairs are getting a bit hard. And also, look, the garden is quite a bit of work to do. And, we live in a two-story home and we don't even use upstairs. So it's a foreseeable health reasons is one of the reasons why they look to downsize. The second thing is financial reasons. So sometimes when I deal with people that are downsizing, they say, look, the reason why we're selling is because we want to sell our primary place of residence and a few investment properties to pay down some debts and then, live off the investments that we have. And also some of these financial decisions also could mean by, look, I need to talk to my estate lawyer. I need to talk to Jacqui from SPG Lawyers because we're looking at actually gifting some money to our kids and helping our kids now with houses because right now it's getting quite hard for our children and our grandchildren. And the third thing is what people want to downsize is actually to simplify their life. So simplifying their life is does not necessarily mean just moving from a larger house to a small house. It also means getting their, I guess, matters in order. So that could mean by if you have a large property portfolio, you run multiple businesses, you want to tell your children and your grandchildren that when you go, what things you want to give to them, or how you want to see things through, or what advice that you want to pass on to them. Simplifying your life also means that you want to have a lot less on your plate. You want to have a lot less on your mind. You want to reduce the number of responsibilities that you have. So these are the three main reasons why people are looking to downsize, in my experience. Now, let me tell you a story of Laurie. So I received a phone call early this year from one of my referral partners, Carrie. And Carrie got on the phone to me and she said, Henry, um, I need you to refer one of my clients, Laurie. Now, Carrie's actually from InvoCare. Now, InvoCare is one of the largest funeral home providers in Australia, and she's a prepaid funeral consultant. Now, Laurie is actually 92 years old. And Carrie said, Henry, you'll be talking to Larissa and Shelley, his two daughters. So I received a phone call from Larissa and Shelley, and Larissa and Shelley said, Henry, we need you to sell Dad's home. Dad's 92. He's actually currently in the aged care facility at the moment, and we really need to sell to pay off the home. But what's most important for us is that we need him to get as much money as possible. He's sacrificed a lot. Him and Mum has sacrificed a lot to bring us up, to provide us with, a very good life. So it's very important for us that he gets as much as possible. I said, okay, no worries then. When can I see you? They said, look, how about next week? So I went to see them. And as I sat down and looked through the house, they said, look, Henry, just want to be upfront with you and transparent. You are agent number three. And I was like, okay, no worries then. And they said, look, now can you help us out and then tell us how can we get the most that we want for Dad's place? And I said, if getting the most amount of money is very important for you and selling in a short period of time, you need to have a think about two things in mind. The first thing is to get the most amount of money for your home, you need to get a cash unconditional contract. Now, let me explain. The other two agents that you deal with, or most agents that you deal with, they specialize in selling to local buyers who are limited by bank valuation. So most sales actually have a finance clause, which means when you sell a property and it's subject to finance, the buyer's bank will send a valuer. And the valuer goes, look, the house is worth this much money. So let's say you sign a contract at $1.25 million and the bank says the valuation is at $1 million. Well, the contract will crash because the valuation doesn't stack up. So the more money that you want for a home, you can't have a finance clause. The minute you have a finance clause, you are literally limited by bank valuation. That's the first thing. The second thing is to get the most amount of money, you need to get as many buyers as possible to compete for your dad's home. So most agents rely on realestate.com.au and domain, nothing wrong with that, but they rely on buyers typing the word Wishart in this case. So that means they're relying on buyers that want to buy in Wishart right now. Now, what if the buyers from interstate and overseas and they have the money to buy within 12 k's of CBD, close to a shopping center, good school catchment, but they have never heard of Wishart? Can they find your dad's property? Well, the answer is no, because they've never heard of it. Real estate portals only rely on buyers typing the suburb in the search engine. So what you need is an agent that has a network to actually bring those buyers in. So anyways, they said, okay, Henry, great. And, we're happy to go along with you, your agent number three. And as soon as they signed the paperwork, I asked them, why did you choose me? They said, Henry, apart from the fact that you have access to buyers, now, firstly, you came referred by Carrie. Secondly, I actually checked out your Google reviews, and one of the reviews was a name by Chuck Galea. And Larissa said, Henry, he was actually one of our Sunday school teachers from years ago, and we have deep respect for him, and you saw his whole family. I'm like, okay, great. And the third thing is, Henry, the third thing is, you actually sold for my former sister-in-law. And I said, who's that? And I said, Henry, Larissa said, Henry, my sister-in-law, former sister-in-law, uh, Desley, you sold her home to an interstate South Australian Chinese buyer who paid a cash unconditional contract sight unseen more than any local buyer. I'm like, oh, okay, great. And I said, how are you related? And then she said, look, Henry, Desley is actually my husband's brother's ex-wife. So I'm like, okay, great. So that's how the dots connect. But anyways, we'll get back to the story on 92 Delavan Street, Wishart, four bed, two bath, two car. So I said, if you want to sell for the most amount of money, what you want to do is present the house very well. Apart from decluttering and doing the gardens, you want to stage the house. And Larissa and Shirley said, look, do we really need to spend that money? I said, look, I would see that as staging a house is an investment. So staging means you get a professional company, they come in, they hire the furniture, and they deck the house so it looks very presentable. Now, the reasons why you stage your house is so the photos look great. When the photos look great, you get more inquiries online, more inspections, lead to more offers, which makes more competition. But also another thing is, you see, from a buyer's point of view, you see, this house was actually vacant. It's actually empty when Laurie moved out. This house is over 40 years old. When you sell a vacant house, you can still sell. What happens when a buyer walks into a 40-year-old house and is not staged? They start looking around and they start thinking about what needs maintenance, what needs fixing. Now, when a buyer is in that mindset, what needs maintenance, what needs fixing, what happens to the offer? The offer gets less and less and less. When you actually stage the house, you literally divert the buyer's attention because they are seeing all the other buyers there, lots of competition. They're saying, okay, look, I'm going to miss out. You have FOMO if you're missing out. Not just that, you also, the buyer feels like, look, this is a great house. It's a great lifestyle. So you're diverting the buyer's attention from what needs fixing to, hey, I'm going to miss out. This is a great house. You are selling the lifestyle. So that's the reason why we stage. So we ended up staging the house for 92 Delavan Street, Wishart. And before we move on, I also need to mention to you about the psychology of a buyer. So most of you on this webinar probably have bought properties before, or you know someone else who has bought a property. Now, is it fair to say that as a buyer, you want to pay the minimum price for a house possible? So if the house is 1.5 million, if you can get away with paying 1.2 million, you pay 1.2 million. You're not going to pay the maximum, you pay the minimum, right? As a buyer. The second thing is, as a buyer, you are very cautious. So you may have $10 million in the bank, but you want to make sure you don't pay more than bank valuation, so you whack a finance clause. And you also whack a cooling off period in case you spot a better opportunity. You also whack a building and pest clause. And if you're really lucky, you're whacking a due diligence clause as well, if you can, because the buyer is always cautious. So two things, the buyer wants to pay the minimum price and they're always cautious. So knowing that, let's move on. I mentioned to Larissa and Shelley, there are two ways we can actually sell a property. Now, option A is your traditional method that most agents use. And in this environment, in option A, you have a cooling off period. So cooling off period means a buyer has 5 business days to literally change their mind after it's under contract. And they say, look, doesn't suit me, I want out. So you got to refund the deposit. There's also a finance clause. So a finance clause could be 14 days, 21 days, 30 days. And a finance clause means it's subject to the bank valuation. So which means you're actually limited to how much you can sell for, depending what the bank thinks it's worth. The third thing is building and pest inspection. Now, the building and pest inspection, not sure if many of you realize, but the actual definition in the contract of sale is to the buyer's satisfaction. Meaning that even if the buyer does a building a pest and there's nothing majorly wrong with the house, a buyer can just say 3 words, I'm not satisfied, and they can actually pull out. Just 3 words, I'm not satisfied, and you have to refund the deposit. So it's basically a get out of jail free clause. And in this method of sale, there's a no deadline, and also they negotiate your price down. Our next option is called option B. In this option, there are no conditions. You have no cooling off, no finance, no building a pest. There's a deadline. And in this environment, buyers pay more and more. They negotiate up instead of down. So I said, Larissa and Shelley, which one would you rather choose? Option A and option B. And they said, Henry, look, we need to sell this quickly and we don't want to have any dramas of contract crashing, and we don't want to be limited by the bank valuation. We are happy to go for option B. I'm like, good answer. So option B is called an auction. Now, the auction works extremely well depending on the agent. So it's actually not the auctioneer, it's actually depending on the agents and the agent's ability to bring buyers to the auction. And that means the agent needs to be able to draw in local buyers, interstate and overseas. So the agent must have contacts to interstate and overseas buyers that haven't considered your suburb to come and introduce to your property. Now, we ended up selling 92 Delavan Street, Wishart, for $1.5 million. Now, prior to auction, the buyer that bought the property literally offered a few $100,000 less. I think it was about $1.3 million. But coming to auction, because they had to compete with overseas and interstate buyers, they had to pay an extra $200,000. Now, in that very same environment, there's two other houses over here, 52 Winthrop Street, Wishart. This house is about 350 square meters. The house that we saw is around just over 200. This other house, 29 Stackpole Street, also in the same suburb, a few streets away, is also larger than this house. It doesn't make sense from a valuation standpoint. How can we achieve 1.5 million? Well, the reason why we did that is actually via an auction is because the local buyers had to compete with interstate and overseas. Is actually through competition and not subject to bank valuation, we were able to achieve $1.5 million. Because we actually achieved such a great outcome, we actually got contacted by the Courier Mail, literally. And we were featured in the Courier Mail and realestate.com.au. Local family beats international buyers in fast-paced bidding war for their new home. Because our job is basically, of course, to get as much money as we can for our clients, cash. Now, moving on, I come across a lot of sellers, throughout my career, and my career spans since 2006 until now, 2025. And I wanted to go through with you these questions that most agents will never tell you. So most agents will never volunteer this information, and here are 8 questions that you should ask the agents that you're interviewing. Now, the first question is, okay, can you show me a detailed report of your last 20 sales? You personally, not your office. Now, let me elaborate on this. Those of us who have been to school before, and those of us who have children or nieces or nephews, how do we judge their progress in school? The report card, right? Agents, the same thing as well. When you're interviewing an agent, give us your report card. Show us your last 20 sales. Now, the reason why I mention you personally, not your office, is because a lot of sales agents, they have this called sales talk. And they said, we sold this, we sold that. Well, that we is me and 10 other agents. You want the agent personally, because it's the agent that you're actually appointing, not the entire office. Now, what you want in this detailed report card is you want to have the actual address, the list price, how much it's sold for, days on market. Now, days on market is the day that it's advertised to the day they get a contract for that property. But what you're after is this most important one, the number of days to unconditional. Now, what that means is, let's say, for example, the days on market is 20 days. So it's been advertised for 20 days and they've got a contract on the property. Now, on that 20, but it's subject to finance, and the finance clause is 30 days, right? So you have 20 days plus 30 days equals 50 days. So the number of days to unconditional is 50 days. That's a more important figure than the days on market. Also, you want to have a look at the number of inspections at that property and also the number of bidders. Our next question is, when I list with you, will you be personally doing all the open homes inspections and calling the buyers? Now, when I meet quite a few sellers and they said, look, Henry, you're the next agent we're happy to go ahead with. And I said, how was your experience with the previous agent? And they said, Henry, look, we thought they were the number 1 or number 2 agent in the area. And they said, look, they will come to all the open homes. They didn't. Because if someone sells 100 houses a year, they literally can't attend every single open home. They literally can't call all the buyers back. It's literally not possible. So what happens is they get the junior or they get the secretary to attend to that, but they did not tell the seller that. So it's very important that you ask these questions so you know exactly what you're going to get. The last thing you want is the agent promising you everything and they don't show up for the open homes. You're like, why is the secretary doing the open home? So I hope you understand that and make sure you ask this question. So the third question is, you see, all agents advertise on realestate.com.au and domain.com.au. Now, would you actually appoint an agent if they go, I'm not going to advertise on any real estate portals? Of course not. Now, the reason why agents advertise on these portals is because to attract the buyers who specifically want to buy in that suburb. Now, if exposure is the most important thing for you to get more views, more offers, more competition, you need to be very specific and ask, exactly what packages are you getting on realestate.com.au and domain. Now I can let you know that the highest package you can get on realestate.com.au is called a Premier Plus with an audience maximizer. Any other package on realestate.com.au less than that, if the agent promises that, actually gets you less views, less inquiries, and less eyeballs on your property. The same thing with domain. Now, domain deals a lot with interstate buyers. In fact, every year I'll probably sell close to half a dozen properties where the buyer literally came from domain and not on realestate.com.au, and the buyer did not go on realestate.com.au because these are buyers who move from interstate and they're just getting used to domain. Now, with domain, the highest package is called the Platinum Edge package with social boost. Again, if an agent has domain, but they don't have these packages, that's fine. It means you're getting less views, less inquiries, probably less people coming to open homes. So our next question. I'm Chinese myself, and I sell in markets where there's also quite a number of Chinese buyers. Now, Chinese buyers buy all over Southeast Queensland. They buy mansions, knockdown houses, rooming accommodations, you name it, they'll buy it. Um, now, when one of the questions is, you wanted to ask them, do you market to Chinese buyers, and how do you market to them? Does anyone in your team speak Chinese? Have you hired an interpreter? Do you use WeChat and RedNote? Now, what I realize is that when I'm actually dealing with Chinese buyers, a lot of the time the money comes from the parents or grandparents that don't speak English. That's where the real money comes from, even though the purchase is under son's or grandson's name or granddaughter or daughter's name. Now, it's much easier to negotiate if there is someone in the real estate agent's team that speaks Mandarin. If they're really good, if they are a very good agent, they should actually pay for an interpreter. Now, two of the social media platforms that Chinese people actually use is actually WeChat, and it's called Literal Transaction. It's actually not Red Note, it's actually Little Red Book. But it actually requires a person to actually speak Chinese, converse in that. And this is how you actually market to Chinese buyers. Now, the next thing is what you want to ask the agent is what is your understanding of social media? You see, on realestate.com.au, the average person spends about 40 minutes per month. On social media, the average adult spends about 60 hours per month on social media. So if we're on the game of getting eyeballs, see, we want to make sure that the agent is actually on social media or has a very large social media presence. Because you see, all the active buyers that want to buy in that specific suburb, let's call it Broadbeach, right, will be on realestate.com.au. But the passive buyers are the ones that they don't have to buy. If it comes along, it comes along. They're the ones that are on social media. So it's very important that the agent also has some sort of presence on social media. Now, how do you find the agent on social media? You just basically Google them. And this is us, Henry Wong Unlocked. We've got over 11K followers. And also on LinkedIn as well. Now, it's very important that the agent also has a massive, decent LinkedIn presence. Now, when you speak to agents, they probably just have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. But did you know that the average LinkedIn member makes 2 to 3 times more money than those on Facebook and Instagram? So if you're after decision makers, especially the white collar workers or people like say that run law firms, or people that own, large businesses, they're actually on LinkedIn. They're not dancing on TikTok. I can tell you that. So it's very, very important the agent has a presence on LinkedIn. Now, also another thing is one of the questions you want to ask is, and a very important question is, what are the positives and negatives of my property? You see, every agent can talk about the positives, how good the property is. But the key is the real test is how do they deal with the negatives? You see, every property has positive and negatives. And it's how will you deal with the negatives and talk to buyers when asked. So let me let me give you an example. I recently got a property under contract in Cornubia, and the hill of this driveway is very, very steep. It's steep to the point where quite a number of times, me and the buyers, we literally have to walk sideways like a crab to make sure we don't fall and break something, right? It's that steep. And look, this is a concern, right? So, how do we address this? Well, I tell buyers, you know what, as because of this steep driveway, as you know, water flows down. There's no flood issues over here. You got views over here, right? Not just that. I also say, you know what, because of this steep driveway, who's going to rob your place? It's a positive, right? So sometimes you need to have a bit of humor to put a positive spin on things. Also, you got to be very, very strategic about it. You see, currently, I'm actually selling an apartment, and this apartment is literally next to a major main road, like a major main road. Now we can't change the location of the property, obviously, and asked the owner. I said, look, can you tell me what times you've been living here for the past 5, 6 years? What times are the most quiet? And he said, look, Henry, probably Sunday morning, Saturday very early mornings, 9 o'clock, thereabouts. But any other time, it gets a bit noisy with the main road. I said, okay, great. And see, all the windows and doors are all double glazed. So we make sure we mention that in advertising. So what we did was we are actually going to have the auction on the Sunday morning because that's when traffic is very, very quiet, right? Like we can't control location, but we can control when we have the open homes and when we have the inspections. Not just that, we want to make sure there's actually two of us. So whenever someone actually goes out to the balcony to open the door, we make sure we close it straight away because you want to block out the noise, right? We have a portable speaker that we bring to all open homes to get the buyers in the mood, the music, but also when you play the music and you close the windows, you don't really hear much of a noise. So we're very strategic in what we do, and that's how you expect an agent to answer the question about negatives of my property. Now, moving on, um, we have Google the agent. Now, this is extremely, extremely important. Now, you Google, doctors, dentists, plumbers, electricians, anyone that you want to spend money with, you Google them. Googling the agent is no different. Now, the reason why I mentioned this is because you don't know what you can find. Now, 2 years ago, I was actually speaking to a homeowner. Now, she was actually living in an area that very, very far away that I don't really sell in. So I said, look, have you Googled the agent? And I said, no, I haven't. I'm actually thinking of appointing this agent. This agent is actually the number two agent in the area that I'm selling. And I said, okay, great, great, great. So I Googled this agent for her. And you won't believe what came up. And when this agent came up, it turns out that this agent was previously investigated by the Office of Fair Trading because this agent had actually sold properties in the past to his wife and to his parents without disclosing to the seller. Now, luckily, I Googled this agent for her, right? So I Googled it for her, and then she goes, look, Henry, thank you so much for that information. I definitely won't be choosing this agent. I'll be choosing another agent. So that's why it's very important you Google the agent in case you might find some, I guess, unforeseen things. So, so when you Google the agent, also, you can see how many reviews they have and any information that is not so favorable as well. So, Googling the agent, look through their reviews as well. Um, Now, the last question is, apart from realestate.com.au and domain, how else can you introduce buyers to my home? Now, this question is to unravel the agent's network. You see, the majority of real estate agents rely on these main two portals for the buyers to inquire and to inspect, and that's it. That's literally how they make a living, and they're literally order takers. What you're after is where else in the agent circle are they part of any associations or network that they pull buyers from? So let me give you an example. I'm a sponsor of the Brewers Lunch in Brisbane. So there's usually around about 200 plus professionals. I refer quite a number of clients and people to professionals like lawyers, mergers and acquisitions. So one of my referral partners deals with businesses north of $20 million sale price. So I refer him HR people, clients as well. They also refer clients to me who are actually looking to buy properties as well. So obviously I have a bias towards my own listings. I'm also a member, I'm also on the leadership team for the Kingdom Entrepreneurs Network. It's a Christian-based business network where a lot of established business owners and advisors that are making between $1 to $20 million a year. Now, if you're making that kind of money, obviously you can afford quite a lot of properties. So because of these other networks that I'm part of, I can actually introduce quite a number of buyers and advisors and their clients to properties that I have. And that's how I actually bring buyers from outside realestate.com.au and domain. So you want an agent that is very proactive in expanding their network to bring buyers to have a look at your home. So that's question number 8. Now, apart from that, if you have any other questions, I'll try to go back. Feel free to give me a call, and you can also follow me on Facebook or on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much, Henry. That was wonderful. In fact, I was so engrossed that I haven't even looked at the Q&A. So sorry. We'll get to you soon. I love insider secrets too. I used to do a lot of that myself, like how to find a good lawyer. Like, what do you look for? And I love Googling and I love stalking people on LinkedIn and actually seeing if they're active, seeing if they're ahead in their industry, seeing if they're regularly posting and engaged with other people and, learning, constantly learning or constantly pushing themselves. I think that that is really important. You don't want someone who's sort of fading into the background, that's for sure. So thank you. Wonderful information. I'm now going to steal your control and switch over to my presentation. Right. So, um, of course, there's many situations, aren't there, of downsizing. So we've got someone like Laurie in Henry's example who has a main residence and that's pretty much it, and it's got to be sold, and he's already in care. Or we've got the people who have maybe, a couple of investment properties and they're downsizing their main one, or they're, self-funded retirees. So what I'm talking about is specifically for those people who are already on a Centrelink aged pension or who are planning to prepare to be on a Centrelink pension. And even thinking about aged care as well, we've just had, the aged care reforms have been pushed back to the 1st of November, but we've got new asset testing coming ahead there as well. So the amount of assets that you have that aren't in your primary residence will be really important. So of people who reach 65 years of age, a third of all men who live thereafter will end up in some form of aged care, and half of all women who live beyond that will end up in some form of aged care. So we do have to think about what happens after our family home. So many people come and see me and say, I never want to go into aged care. I'm going to stay in my house. But the fact is that the house might be too big, might be very difficult. There are so many range of factors that needs to consider downsizing. They may stay in their own home, but not the huge family home, downsize to something smaller and more manageable, but not necessarily aged care. The new aged care reforms are actually bringing in much more funding for stay-at-home packages. So it is actually what the government wants to happen as well, for us to stay in our homes as long as possible. But of course, one little old person can't stay in a 5-bedroom, 2-story house. So, this is the reality that we need to be thinking about. So the Centrelink test, here it is for assets. So for a full pension, a homeowner can have an additional 320,000, as well as the house. So as soon as they sell that house, as a non-homeowner, they can only have about 580,000, or they lose their full pension. So of course, as soon as you sell any house on the Gold Coast, you're going to have upwards of $1 million in the bank, and so you'll not have your full pension anymore. If a couple were to do that, you can see at the bottom here, to keep their part pension, a couple can have up to 1.3 mil and not own a home anymore. So you would still be on a part pension then. So quite often we're talking about dropping down from a full pension to a part pension. So then, of course, some of the problem is when trying to nurture our aging loved ones to consider downsizing, they are worried that they will lose their pension. And then so they start thinking, well, I'm going to give some away. And then the problem is that affects your pension. So if you're not worried about Centrelink at all, there are no gift taxes. You don't have to worry about the Centrelink test. So for those who have self-funded retirees, multiple investments, and they sell their main home and go down to a smaller home, they can give money to their kids without a problem, right? In that situation, there are other factors that you're looking at to doing that, but you're not worrying about Centrelink. So quickly with some of the aged care reforms, the basic daily fee is going to stay the same. And we're now also not going to contribute to clinical care. We're going to contribute to non-clinical care, and we're going to contribute to a hoteling supplement if we have a certain amount of assets. So we've also got changes with the RAD, the bond. So it used to be capped at 550,000. That cap is going up to 750,000. And you used to get the whole amount back once you left aged care or passed away. Now they're taking up to 10% of that. So it's 2% every year for 5 years. So you end up losing a bit depending on what you put in. So just bearing these things in mind. The means test, so they're going to be capping. If you have your home, when you're getting assessed for aged care, they cap the value of the home at 206,000. So they're not going to value your home at an actual value. But as soon as you have assets over 340,000, which includes the home, you then have to start contributing to your non-clinical care and your hoteling supplement. So bear those things in mind. Centrelink does assess your assets differently from aged care. Centrelink won't count your home at all, but aged care does. So what is the gifting rule? The gifting rule arose because we don't want people giving away their assets to qualify for the pension. Simple as that. So if people are pre-planning to get themselves onto a pension, they need to pre-plan at least 5 years out, because Centrelink looks at the last 5 years. And then once you get onto a pension, again, you've got a 5-year window, and you can only give away 30,000 in the 5-year window. So that's really limiting. If you do over that, you're penalised. You can have your pension either completely taken off you, dropped all the way down to a part pension, or you can still be assessed as having the assets that you gave away. But there is an exemption to the gifting rule. So the RAD, the payment of going into aged care, is exempt from the gifting rule. So of course, that's a payment for your ongoing care. It's not counted as an asset. So it sits, of course, in a trust account that's run by the aged care facility. It's no longer something that you're earning money on, so they don't count it. And a granny flat payment. So this is another interesting concept. So if people are downsizing from their main residence and actually aren't buying another house for themselves, they can give money to their child to improve their home, build a separate living space, or put a granny flat in the backyard. And that granny flat arrangement, which we can document, is payment for exchange for the right to live in a home. So the government recognises that it's not a gift of cash to get rid of your assets, it's a gift of cash to keep you out of the aged care system because you're going to be living with family. So I've had people do up to like $400,000 or $500,000 as a granny flat payment to do significant improvements to a child's home so that they can live there. So bathroom renovations, ramps, independent living space, whole new room and kitchen built onto a house. So all those things can be done as a granny flat payment. But essentially, it is also, in a way, a gift to the child who's looking after you because it's improving their property. So it's no longer your own cash. You have built up the value of your family member's home or property. Even if you put a granny flat building into the back of their house, their yard, it's an improvement on their land. So it's not something that you're going to own. So that is something to bear in mind as well, particularly with estate planning, because if it could potentially create problems between your kids with you having given so much money to one of the kids and the others are like, well, that's not fair. You do have to think that through a little bit as well. But there's, of course, other considerations. So this is not only with Centrelink or with granny flats. Other considerations come into play as soon as you start thinking about downsizing and giving money or assets to kids. So that includes if you try and give away your own home, for example, to your child, of course, there's stamp duty on any transaction at market value. So it's not like you can give an asset without there being tax penalties. Or if you downsize your home and then want to buy your kids some houses, of course, there's stamp duty to pay on any purchase in that respect. So just thinking ahead as well. But as soon as you also put assets into the hands of your children, you can no longer protect what happens with them then. So you have to think about, well, is my child exposed to a family law claim if there was a separation or a bankruptcy claim or a professional negligence issue? So thinking about those things. If you gave your child the money to buy a property, so you give your child $1 million, but you want to protect it and you take out a mortgage on the house they buy, so you're the bank essentially, that mortgage of the $1 million is an asset, of course, so that's going to be counted anyway. So it sort of defeats the purpose if you are trying to reduce your assets for an asset test. And then, as I touched on before, estate planning is also an issue or can be an issue. It depends on your family dynamics. Is there early inheritance issues if you give some children something and others not? How do you then equalize that later if that's something you're thinking about? Because the cash value of money is, of course, changing over time. It's more valuable the earlier people get it. And so if you gave someone $100,000 10 years ago and you try and even it out with $100,000 today, it's definitely not the same value. So just thinking about that over time as well. So lots of little things to think about because it's not just a simple process. We are now going to Q&A, and so all of those people, sorry, who are listening to the recording, I am going to stop the recording now. So those lucky people who came along live are going to get to put their hand up and ask questions. So that's an incentive for you if you register for these to come along live. So thank you very much for watching. And if you do have questions as a replay watcher, my email address is there. And of course, you can rewind to Henry's slide for his contact details. All right. Stopped recording.